Hello and welcome to the Saturday Down South podcast. He is Chris Marler. I am Connor O'Gara. Marler, it is time for Just Met More.
Yeah.
Today, very, very special day. We have never done basketball before, but that is what we are doing today because right now, if you're listening to this on Thursday, not to depress everybody, but this would have been the opening round of the NCAA tournament. Now, I don't mean to be a downer. We're going to take your mind off of the fact that you could be watching games right now, and instead, we're going to go back in time. And instead, we're going to go back to a time, 2008, when Georgia completed this run in the SEC tournament that was just unlike anything we'd ever seen for a variety of reasons. A big one being, oh, by the way, a tornado ripped through downtown Atlanta.
Yeah, that was a thing.
That was a thing. Still even weird to go back and think about that. But for preparation for this, usually with a Just Met More, we will go back and we'll watch an old game. And originally when we were throwing out the idea of how best we could cover this, given the timely elements and, given the similarities, I think that kind of made people think of the 2008 tournament when all this talk about, playing the 2020 SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament in front of no fans. I think a lot of people were like, hey, we found a way to make this work back in 2008. The difference, of course, being that in 2008, they still continued the tournament. They just moved it to Georgia Tech. They actually continued the game that night post-tornado between Alabama and Mississippi State, which I don't think that happens.
Was not happy about that?
I don't think that happens today, but it happened then.
No.
So there were some similarities in that regard. But what a strange thing to look back on. And so to best tell this story, and what I recommend you do, is go back and watch the SEC Story documentary, Miracle 3. It is available on YouTube for $1.99. I think on most cable providers, if you have SEC Network, you can watch this on demand. Am I correct in that?
So I have Comcast, and
the worst.
Yeah, it's on demand.
Comcast is awful.
They've been surprisingly they've been a lot better than I thought they would be. But yeah, usually their customer service is the worst.
Ugh.
But I told you when I moved in, I was like outside talking to my neighbor, waiting on them. He was like, well, we'll be there from 3 to 5. I was like, yeah, you'll be here at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I was just talking blank about them to my neighbor. That was my introductory little conversation with them. And as I said, I was like, they're not going to be here for hours. They just turned the corner. So they've actually been they've been fine. But anyway, they you can get that on demand, I think, for the SEC Network. They actually have all of the docs. They have the SEC Storied docs, which I wish they would do with 30 for 30, but that's neither here nor there.
They have that on ESPN Plus, where if you have access to that, you'd be able to see the library of content that they have. But we recommend going back and rewatching this doc because it tells this story in a way that even if you just kind of go back and randomly click on articles, you probably can't quite find. And it's a tremendous doc if you have 50 minutes of time during this coronavirus stuff to spare with all your social distancing. So a brief little rundown here of what was going down. For those who don't remember this and they're relying on us to sort of set the scene for them. A tornado hit the Georgia Dome in the middle of the quarterfinal game for the SEC tournament between Alabama and Mississippi State. That's right. A tornado hit the Georgia Dome, which a tornado coming through Atlanta downtown Atlanta, that had never happened before, as they said in the doc. And so this happens actually happens in overtime while all this is happening. But what this doc really details, and the reason for the title, Miracle 3, is because this three-point shot that ultimately Alabama hits at the end of regulation essentially could have saved thousands of lives and people being at risk of being outside wandering the streets of downtown Atlanta while all this was going on. Meanwhile, all this stuff happens. They move the event to Georgia Tech Stadium, ironically enough, and then little old Georgia, the worst team in the SEC this year, pulls off something that we've never seen before and we've never seen since, which was win 2 games in the same day and then turn around the day after on Sunday and win the SEC championship. An unbelievable story that you kind of just had to be there or you had to rewatch something like this to believe it.
Yeah, so I definitely remember this from happening, and I kept saying last week, I was like, I think this would be a much better episode than doing the Kentucky-Arkansas one from 95, even though that's an incredible game and 2 incredible teams. But this was just such a ridiculous just series of events. You know what I mean? Not even just with the Georgia like winning it and like being the worst team in the league or whatever, but also just with, like you said, everything that happened, the tornado going downtown. You just don't ever see that. And I watched the doc twice, back to back, because I was like,
sick brag.
even like I remember this happening. I remember watching the Bama game live in Milledgeville in my apartment 222, The Grove, Milledgeville, Georgia. I didn't remember how many crazy things happened that weekend. Like, the fact they won, like you said, they played 2 games in the same day, and that hadn't been done in 47 years. The fact they won 3 games in 30 hours, it's just the whole thing was nuts.
It was just bizarre set of circumstances, and the SEC deserves a lot of credit for the pivoting that they did to be able to have this event. And there was talks, former SEC commissioner, the late Mike Slive, talked about the desire to potentially just cancel the tournament altogether and to just crown the regular season champion as the automatic qualifier. Of course, had that happened, we never would have seen Georgia win in really unprecedented fashion. We'll dig into that a little bit more later, but just a couple of other details about kind of how this all went down. So, the scene of watching scaffolding fall from the Georgia Dome and everybody just kind of looking up. And remember, this is in the pre-Twitter existence where you can't just hop on your phone and be like, oh, I saw that they just canceled all the games or whatever. Such a crazy, wild scene to look up at the roof of the Georgia Dome. And they said it in the doc. It looked like bed sheets going down on a bed. Like, that's the way that things were moving. 130 mile per hour winds outside, and everybody's just like kind of looking around like, what in the world are we doing? Camera starts going fuzzy. It looks like 1989 World Series, all over again. I mean, like, right. Bizarre set of circumstances. I've never seen anything quite like that in the middle of a game. And then to have that happen conference championship weekend when the schedule is so condensed just made everything that much more atypical.
Yeah, I didn't remember this happening during the actual broadcast because, like I said, I was watching it live. I don't remember them staying on air because they said it in the doc. They stayed on air for 64 minutes, which, like, Tim Brando, we have different views on him.
I do too. By the way, so I messaged him because I thought what he did was super impressive. And I had no idea, like you said, that they were on for 64 minutes. So he actually, I tweeted like an appreciation of what he did. He had this quick response. Sorry to interrupt you on that, but he said, it was as unique a situation as any I'd ever dealt with at the time in my career. Our crew was impeccable. Our line producer at the time, Dave Behringer, is as creative as they come, and Alex Farmartino, sorry about that, Alex, worked his tail off getting pictures. Total team efforts. So there's one thing that you can agree with Tim Brando on.
Did you follow up with him and ask him why he blocked me ever?
Didn't get to that.
Okay, we'll figure it out someday. No, but so, like, that is an incredibly impressive thing to fill up that much airtime, like 64 minutes. See, I don't remember that happening because I felt like we were far enough, like, Milledgeville's like an hour and a half away from Atlanta, so we were far enough away from the storms. I don't remember it being that crazy in Milledgeville, but I definitely remember, like, this, like, the TV or the cable just going out. And I'm sure there were storms, like, in Milledgeville because it's not super far away, but I remember, like, the cable just going out, and there's like 2 minutes and like 50 seconds to go in overtime of the Bama game. And I'm like, what? And like you said, there's no Twitter. Like, I had no idea what was going on. Just like, I'm in my apartment by myself, losing my mind. It's also a Friday night and I'm in college, so I probably should have been like going out and having fun. But I was like, what the hell is happening? Like, whatever Grove internet cable we were paying for at the time, which was probably like $7 a month. So I was pretty irate because you didn't know what was going on until they came back. And like, at that point, like, no one else was reporting on it. Like they didn't say anything right away on SportsCenter, and you weren't close enough to Atlanta to have like, like the local news, I have like breaking, there's a tornado. You just kind of sat there like, what in the hell just happened?
And the strange thing is, so while all this is going down and they're trying to figure out, well, are we best to cancel the rest of the game and tell everybody to go home? They're like, oh, wait, there is a tornado going on outside right now. We can't just send 20,000 people outside of the stadium and have them at risk. But at the same time, like, you've got all these weird dynamics where, the Georgia Dome just looked like a war zone. Some of the shots that they had in the dock where water is just pouring down the stairs and you've got metal panels popping off. Just like bizarre stuff that's going down. And meanwhile, all these people are in this stadium trying to watch a conference tournament game. And, the thing that I still like, watching some of the images of downtown Atlanta was just crazy, by the way. They even had, I think it was the chairman of the Omni Hotel, a place where we, spent a lot of time at for SC Media Days, a place where really, really well. I mean, like, seeing the shots of downtown Atlanta and what these people could have been exposed to is crazy. I mean, I can't picture that type of disaster going through a major city. I still can't get over that.
The pillars in Centennial Olympic Park.
Oh yeah, great.
That
point.
were like 45 feet tall and like obviously very, very heavy. Those toppling over, because like the stuff going through I think they said in totality, I think it was $250 million in damage.
Yep.
Which it's hard to even wrap your head around that because it was so quick. It happened just like in an instant. And like you even heard like the meteorologist they were talking to said, I was like, I almost felt like angry and like misinformed. Like maybe not, that I think it's a GIF now, and also it used to be like a video from Chris Marler where he's like what?
Oh yeah,
getting coffee, and all of a sudden he's like, you lied to me. Like that's how I felt because he was like, we knew there were going to be a lot of tornadoes the next day, and I was like, hold on, what? Mm-hmm. We knew this was going to happen. So obviously it happens like in the middle of the night. And if you've never been in like a tornado, like warning, watch, whatever. That's one thing I wrote down that I forgot about because every single time I hear tornado watch or warning, I always forget which one's worse.
Yeah,
like every single time.
Warning is worse than watch, right? Yeah,
I think watch is worse than warning because I think watch means it's like there. I don't know. I don't want to do this right now. Okay, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. But no, it's like if you've ever been in like a tornado, a scare at least, like especially at night, there's nothing more terrifying because you can't see. Like in the daytime, you like the sky's kind of turn like a greenish color, and you can kind of see it coming. This just kind of came out of nowhere, and I can't imagine like how terrifying it would be to be in the dome itself and then not know where to go. Like you can't run outside.
Right.
You've seen The Wizard of Oz. You know what happens.
Fair spoiler
but also,
alert, not good.
Alonzo G is at the line shooting free throws. Like I just, usually just get those like balloon animals in the like behind the backboard and just wave them back and forth. No, we've got a damn tornado coming through.
That first shot back was an absolute dud.
Dude, that's the first thing I wrote down on my notes. I wrote down two things about the actual like tournament itself, and then it went right into how disappointed I was in this stupid Bama basketball team.
So that they end up actually continuing the game, that quarterfinal game, and finishing out, which is crazy. And like I said, don't think that happens in 2020. But they ultimately decide, this game that was supposed to continue after Kentucky against Georgia, where all these Kentucky fans who had made it Catlanta, as they always do, were not too happy to see that the game was postponed to the next day. And by the way, it was going to be at Georgia Tech. And just in case that wasn't enough, your tickets weren't going to be honored. It was just going to be a friends and family type deal, which I'm sure that was a really tough decision to have to make because they simply could not accommodate the 20,000 fans that they had at the Georgia Dome at Georgia Tech. So that created a whole different set of circumstances. So like all this is going down, and it sort of sets the stage for, meanwhile, like Georgia is just sitting there as this team that has nothing to lose whatsoever. You find out after that Dennis Felton was doing a lot of the negotiation to say like, hey, let's play, because he knows that the only way his team is getting into the
play in the dark.
Tournament, yeah, we don't care. We'll play wherever. But it sets the stage for this weekend that Georgia has. And I think that all of these things happening, and if you watch the doc, all of this kind of goes down in the first 20 minutes or so, and they really dig into that before they really get into anything related to Georgia basketball.
Yeah. So, we'll get into the Georgia basketball part of it, which was they lost 10 out of 12.
Before we do that, and we will, I promise, we're going to get into that. And I actually thought...
That makes me look really bad because that's the one thing I brought up about Georgia basketball. I have so many complimentary things to say.
That is true. Before we do that, and I promise we're going to get to a lot of Georgia basketball stuff, can you real quick tell us about our friends at BetOnline?
Guys, listen, coronavirus sucks. It's the worst. I will say, usually you have so many distractions to distract us from how awful this is. Or things like this are. We don't really have that as much right now because we don't have March Madness. We've got a lot of other stuff. We got hit up today on Twitter about a fishing tournament. Yeah, I'll bet on that. Go to betonline.ag today. Set up an account. You can bet on anything. There's still sports going on in this world.
Yeah,
not just esports.
Kind of.
Not just cricket. There's something called snooker. I don't know what that is. I think that's that short little gerbil faced girl from Jersey Shore.
Yep,
I don't know.
That's it.
She's built like a guinea pig, but she's super sweet. So you could possibly bet on that. Regardless, go check it out. There's plenty of things to keep you entertained. Go play some poker, whatever you want to do to help pass the time while we are all still in isolation.
Sorry for taking away your transition. It was seamless. It really was.
Well, so you tell me how you want to go through this, because I went down so many rabbit holes with this thing, and it was like I had so much fun with it. I had so much fun with this one, probably honestly more so than any other adjustment more that we've had.
We're gonna do some of the things that we usually do with adjustment more, and some of the things that we don't do, because we realize this is basketball, and we're watching a doc as opposed to one specific game. So we'll do some of the same things. One of the things that is similar is we'll go through the director and the A-listers, I think, and the prominent extras. That's an important part of this, I think. And the Dennis Felton thing, I'm not sure if they really wanted to go down that road very much in the doc. But for those who don't know, the Georgia basketball coach who had worked under Rick Barnes for 6 years at Providence and Clemson, went to 3 straight NCAA tournaments at Western Kentucky, and he was at Georgia during this time, and he was kind of on the end of the rope. Mark Schlabach did this piece basically how the program was kind of in shambles going into this tournament, and there were some bizarre quotes that came out of this story from guys like Sundiata Gaines, and I mean it was just weird seeing them talk about a program like this going while the season was going on. It looks like a story that was written about a coach after he was fired. Now, it was a big struggle for Felton, and in part because of what he inherited from Jim Herrick, who the academic scandal that Jim Herrick's son was a part of was kind of like UNC before UNC. That's what it sounded like. He gave all these Georgia basketball players an A for a basketball strategy class that they didn't go to. That
seems like the easiest class to go to.
Right? Like, why wouldn't you want to go to that class? That'd be fun. Yeah. I wouldn't mind that. But yeah, he got suspended, eventually resigned at the end of the 2003 season. His son, by the way, got a 7-year show cause penalty from the NCAA. 7 years! That's pretty impressive.
Goodness.
Nobody was going to hire him anyways. But, I mean, this is the same guy who actually won a national title with Ed O'Bannon at UCLA back in 95.
The O'Bannon brothers, and Tyus Edney.
Yeah, people forget that. So, anyways, that's my way of saying Dennis Felton didn't inherit the best situation at Georgia, but he didn't do anything to make it better. And as you brought up earlier, had lost 10 of 12 games coming into the SEC tournament. But Felton, the one thing he said, despite all of that, he's like, you know what? We're just gonna go crazy. We're not gonna pace ourselves. We don't care what the circumstances are. And that was the best possible thing that he could have said, even though his team pretty much ran out of gas in the beginning of the second half, and these teams would come back and go on runs. He was like, we're just going to leave it all out there. They had, guys were getting IVs in between, the first and second game. The job that he did coaching within this weekend, I don't think that really speaks to how his tenure went at Georgia, but he did everything right during this stretch.
So, and this is what was so interesting about this, and like the rabbit holes I got into, and I remember this team very, very vividly, because Milledgeville was only like an hour away from Athens, and I was done playing baseball at the time. My roommate at the time, Tyler Tidwell, who's still a good buddy of mine, his dad was, they had a house like right off Millage Avenue, Millage and Henderson. Like we would go up there all the time in the spring, and we went to several games and stuff like this. I had a Dave Bliss T-shirt jersey, number 42,
the lefty legend.
Okay. Yeah, so I remember this season a lot, and we were watching it and everything like that. And it was an interesting time for Georgia in general. And this is one of the things I was like so fascinated by, like looking up, was you have this season in football in 2007 where they had this tremendous run, and you have so much hype around the program. Like and I still say this, like I love Jacob Hester and all that, and I know LSU won the national title that year. I will say, like till the day I die, that Georgia was the best football team in the country in 2007. At the end of that season, there's not a team in the country that would have beat them. So you have the end of that season and all this excitement coming from, you go to a Sugar Bowl and like I said, like No Show Moreno and the blackout game, all this other stuff. And it goes into basketball season, which wasn't ever great. I think they'd only made it in like the tournament. They'd only made it past the second round once since 1997. It wasn't a great basketball school by any means, but it was still something that like they wanted to be good at. obviously. Like, the fans wanted more. Like, they had a pretty good team in 2003, I think, or 2002 with Jarvis Hayes and all that kind of stuff. But it became this weird thing with Georgia where they were on the cusp, it always felt like, of kind of like getting these huge super recruits and turning the program, like turning a corner in the program, because Georgia is such a hotbed of recruiting for basketball. But it was like, it always ended up being this like what might have been case, you know. And like I talked to you about this beforehand, and where you had Lou Williams from South Gwinnett High School, 5-star, one of the top players in the entire country, committed to Georgia. His teammate Mike Mercer, also a 5-star from South Gwinnett High School. This is the same region that I played in, by the way.
So were they committed in the 2009 class then that Felton was supposed to sign, or 2008?
No, they were committed in 2005. So they were a year younger than me when they graduated high school.
Right. So so you're saying like because of the Felton era, that's what swept them out?
No, so I'm saying you have all this excitement around the program because of these players coming in. Like, Georgia hadn't signed players like that in forever. Like, they just didn't go to it. You got to think, like, they had Georgia Tech to compete with. You have all these other schools to compete with. Like, in Atlanta, they were getting these players. A lot of them didn't go to Georgia. This was like one of the first big signees they'd had in quite some time.
Right. So when were they supposed to? Sorry to interrupt.
They signed in 2005.
They signed, but were they supposed to join Georgia's 2005 class?
They did, yes. Lou Williams went pro.
Right.
Mike Mercer joined it. So you have these guys that were like supposed to kind of turn the program. With Mike Mercer, who played there for 2.5 years. This is what I'm getting to. Yeah. And he was kicked off the team this season. Mm-hmm. And he was the best player on the team by far. Yeah. And then you had guys like Channing Toney, and then Billy Humphries. So all three of these guys played in the same region I played in high school. And so you have a guy like Channing Toney, like, where, like, I understand that, you know, a lot of people put up like numbers in high school, but these guys they were probably the three best players in the history of that like county, and had these crazy like hype surrounding them. And then you have, lo and behold, I know what do you call it? Who left? Billy Humphrey was still there. Then you have Channing Toney left, and he was like one of their best shooters. Obviously, he went to UAB, so you lose him before the season. Then you lose Mike Mercer, and that's because of the Felton thing. So Felton had kind of, I don't want to say mismanaged, but he didn't get all of those players that were supposed to be the turning, like the guys that helped turn this program around. And it was kind of his own fault.
They lost 6 players in 2 years, basically, in that stretch, and that was huge.
And they were all like their best players. Mm-hmm. Like, they were all their best players. And so, yeah, you still have some talent, but like when you talk about the IV thing and getting to this weekend, they only had 7 players. Like, he said they played 6 or 7 people the entire
9
tournament.
scholarship guys.
And like for the most, no, 8. It was 8.
Was it? They kept saying 9.
No, I'm sorry. I think he said it was 8. That was Slaybox said it was 9, but like Felton kept saying it was 8, and they had one that was a walk-on.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean,
so it was just, I mean, like there was the year before this, I think 2006 or after that class, they only signed 1 player. It was like they were very thin.
And Felton, I mean, this run, if he didn't do what he did with a team that was in no position whatsoever to go on a run like this in such short time, I mean, is he fired after that? Probably. And instead they waited.
Well, this was only year 2, right?
No. This was like year 5 that he was there.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it was year 5 that all this had happened, and it was year 6 in which he got fired. They got off to like an 0-5 start in SEC play.
So real quick, just let me into the deep dive. I promise. What was so interesting about this, and like just being someone that grew up in the state of Georgia, was this was like, I felt like at least unprecedented from a term like from an entire athletic department, multiple programs that were signing the most elite talent in the state, and having like, you know, this 2005 thing I kept talking about with Lou Williams. I think that was so important to kind of, just his name going to, like, committing to that school was very big for the program. Then you have like the baseball program, who same year, 2005, they signed one of the best classes in the country, and you have 18 players in a baseball class, which is outrageous. You only get 11.7 scholarships, and I think like 10 of them or so end up going pro because he had all these like crazy talented guys that were in the top 3 rounds. So it just, again, you kind of miss out on some of the talent, but that team ended up going to the College World Series and finishing like runner-up in 2008. So it was just like, so that in that 2005 year, Georgia had also just won the SEC championship in football. So it kind of felt like this whole multi-sport thing, this whole athletic department was going to take over the SEC. At least that's how I felt at the time.
But heading into this tournament, it was not built for Georgia. It just wasn't in any way, shape, or form. But the one thing that did benefit Georgia was once this tornado hit, and all of a sudden you had this change of venue where it wasn't going to feel like a road game for Georgia. And they were going to take a lot of Kentucky fans away from this game because they basically had 400 fans that were going to be able to be there. And there really wasn't this overwhelming feeling of, oh, wow, we're really going into the hornet's nest here. And to Felton's credit, he plays that. Yeah.
It's a beehive.
Oh, I didn't even realize I made that reference.
Come on, man.
Sorry, I'm a little slow today. The one guy on that Georgia team, he is the A-lister who I have. And I'm not even sure if he's really an A-lister in this doc. But the one guy who played in the NBA on this Georgia team was Sundiata Gaines. And he averaged 14, 6, and 4, was a double-digit scorer all 4 years as a starter. But I say that he might not have even been an A-lister because he fouled out with 7 minutes left against Mississippi State. And at the end of the Kentucky game, he fouled out too.
Yeah, that was not great.
Like, it was bad too. He just attacked the basket and went. It was a clear charge too, and they I mean, he was like blown away that they called that on him. I'm like, what are you doing with 4 fouls in that situation? You're the best player.
It was odd because it seemed like if you look at the story as a whole, obviously the whole story of it is like they never gave up, right? They never gave up. But it almost looked like when you see things like that, they were definitely giving up. Like they had lost 10 of their last 12. They had the worst record, I think, in the league. You know, they had just lost to Ole Miss by 12 points at home in their last regular season game before they went and played Ole Miss. And which again, like, it was hard to figure out this team's identity because you want to say it's like this, you know, never give up attitude and against all odds Cinderella story, but they were so crazy up and down where it was like, you know, that first game against Ole Miss, they scored 97 points, and kind of that starts tiring them out before any of this other stuff. They played the 3 games in 30 hours. They hadn't scored more than 70 points in they had only scored 70 points or more in 5 of their last 22 games. Yeah. Like they were just a really bad team, and then all of a sudden, it's just like, I don't know what happened.
Bliss hits the bank shot to beat Ole Miss in the first round game of the SEC tournament before the tornado hit, and at the end of this Kentucky game where they're facing a Kentucky team that's got more talent. And fortunately for Georgia, Kentucky on this day did not have Jody Meeks, did not have Patrick Patterson as well, which is...
Jody Meeks from Gwinnett County as well, same region.
Oh, there you go. That. Okay. So, I mean, they were fortunate. We're going to, trust me, we're going to get to some Billy Gillespie stuff in a bit here.
Yeah.
We can't not talk about Billy Gillespie. But, so Gaines goes out at the end of this Kentucky game, and true freshman Zach Swansea comes in. And I was wondering, as I'm watching this, I wonder if Marler has a good way to describe Zach Swansea. For those who don't know what exactly he looks like or kind of how he carries himself, what's the best way that you can describe that?
He's like if Marshall Henderson was forced to go to church.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
He's like a little bit khackier version of Marshall Henderson because he was actually a pretty good recruit too. He was like a top 150 guy out of Dunwoody in Atlanta.
A true freshman at the time.
He did not look it. Yeah, he did not look it at all.
He had the shaved head, very 2000s look that he was going with here, and massive shorts, of course. So Zach Swansea comes in for Gaines, and in overtime, there's this play where they're down 2. And he's supposed to hand the ball off to Billy Humphrey. They're supposed to come down the court, and Billy Humphrey's supposed to get a screen. And he's supposed to have this clear handoff so Billy Humphrey, their best shooter, can take this 3 for the win, potentially. And the play is set up perfectly. I mean, Humphrey comes around that screen, and he is wide open. All Swansea has to do is just give him the ball. I mean, he could have handed him the ball, and he could have had an open look at a 3. Instead, he does this little turn away half spin move, doesn't give him the ball.
It looked like a glitch in NBA 2K. Like he did a spin move to no one.
Humphrey turns away in disgust. You can see it on the replay. He's like, what did this guy just do? I swear Humphrey didn't even look at the shot as Swansea puts it up. And Swansea puts it up, and it goes in. And it takes the lead. And it's like, holy crap. Is this actually about to happen right now? But I watched that replay like 3 or 4 times just to see Humphrey's reaction, because I'm sure every Georgia fan thought the exact same thing watching this.
So, and again, I don't want to keep harping on just how good they were in high school, but I remember watching this kid in high school, and he put up 50 plus points in 2 high school games, which is crazy. And when you have, he put like the county record, I think it's still 59, and he has the first and third highest or most points scored in a game ever. So, but when you have the reason I bring that up is because if you only have 7 players on the team and one of them has fouled out, yeah, he's probably your go-to.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's probably your go-to. And he did look disgusted. And I remember, like, what was so crazy about this was, again, that Ole Miss game where Georgia was not a very good team. Like, they were 12th or they were 10th in the conference in, like, their scoring offense, like, points per game. Like, in the SEC, in conference play, I think they were last at, like, 61 or 64 or something like that. And they were terrible on the road. Like, they were 2-11 on the year away from home. And all of a sudden, you have this, like, crazy amount of points that scored in the first game. And the next game, they're playing Kentucky, and it was 50-50 at the end of regulation.
Right.
50-50. I was like, so... And what was amazing to me was how many chances Kentucky had to win the game.
So
put
many.
it away.
So many.
And just couldn't. And so then this kid hits this shot, and it was... Like, I think that was the moment I was like, there's something going on here.
Yes.
Like, we've got, like, a story.
Okay, let's get to the prominent extras. Billy Gillespie. He was the SEC basketball version of Lane Kiffin in some ways. Not in all ways, but in some ways.
No, Hugh Freeze.
Ooh, now that's interesting. That's very interesting. Was he?
Well, explain why you said Lane.
Well, I said Lane just because the rumors of him just partying with co-eds.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was a big deal, and part of the reason that Mitch Barnhart said that he wasn't a fit at Kentucky when he was fired after year 2. Guy won SEC Coach of the Year.
Came out?
I did not see the pictures. Was there something related to him being in a hot tub or something?
I thought he was just at, like, a house party or something like that.
Yeah, that could be. Billy Gillespie is probably a swear in the state of Kentucky, I think, which is crazy considering he actually was SEC Coach of the Year in this first year.
The year before.
Yeah, I mean, these expectations for him in this game were very, relatively low. Like I said, they were dealing with those absences. But, this he actually had a lawsuit, too, that came out after he was fired because he had this agreement on a 7-year deal, but he never signed the contract, which...
Oh, yeah.
Why did people do that? That happened. There was some Jimbo Fisher stuff about that, too. If somebody hands you a $75 million check...
Jalen Ramsey do that?
Oh, there was something like that, too. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
If somebody's giving you that much money, just sign the check and ask questions later. But anyways, Billy Gillespie... The only thing that we really got of him in the doc, and I really wish that we would have been able to get an interview with him or more live sound, something. We found out that Billy Gillespie was pretty vocal about having to play 2 games the same day, which, ironically enough, he ultimately did not have to play 2 games the same day because he couldn't even beat Georgia. So Billy Gillespie is a clear loser of this doc.
Yeah, and it sounds like you really hate him for a lot of reasons.
I don't hate him. I think he's entertaining.
But I think it's interesting to, like, bring that up because anytime you talk about SEC basketball, especially if we're looking back at something, like, the default has to be, what was Kentucky that year? Like, how good was Kentucky that year? And I think it was one of the things that was interesting about how all this unfolded was I forgot how in a year where there was so much star power in college basketball, and you're coming off of like the SEC winning back-to-back national championships with Florida. Sure. And then you go into the next year, and they were, as a conference, they were so bad. Mm-hmm. Like, they got 6 teams in the tournament, but you never had. I think they had 1 week where they had 4 teams ranked, but for the most part, you never had more than 2 or 3 teams ranked at a time the entire season. Which is kind of odd because you have just this. I'm not saying this is what allowed Georgia to make this run because it's honestly not. Like, Tennessee got beat by Arkansas. Tennessee was a team that was in the top 5 for most of the season. But you have this weird kind of, I don't know, like sequence of events in this, like in the SEC where you're surprised, like, hold on, like, why didn't someone step forward? Like, why wasn't Georgia better in the regular season? Or, like, like, how are these other teams, like, not with a lot of talent, how did they not take, like, a step forward when there was so much uncertainty? Because you have, like I said, the Florida thing is gone. Like, they've just won. They have 3 players shot from the top 10, so they get pretty gutted. And then you look at Kentucky. This is the only season they didn't win 20 games since 1990.
Yikes.
The only season in program, like, in the last 30 years in this program where they didn't win at least 20 games. It's like one of, like, I think 3 times in the last 30 years they didn't make the NCAA tournament.
The year
so
after.
It was really bizarre.
Yeah,
that's what I meant. Yeah, the year after. It was just really bizarre that it was like you would expect someone to take, claim of the title. You still wouldn't expect it to be Georgia.
Yeah. exactly. The other prominent extra, and I don't think his name was even mentioned in this, but he was the best player on that Arkansas team who ultimately lost to Georgia in the SEC championship on that Sunday. Sonny Weems. I hated this guy because he led Arkansas to a first-round win against Indiana. That's the only reason I really wanted to bring him up, because I had just decided at probably a month or 2 months earlier that I was going to go to Indiana. So, of course, I became an Indiana basketball fan. They had Eric Gordon, DJ White. Oh, that team should have been so much better. But Sonny Weems, first-team All-SEC guy, second-round pick by the Bulls. Really, really, really good dunker. He was a fun guy to watch, but didn't really see much of him in this. But he was the guy that they sort of had to make sure that he didn't, put up 30 in the SEC championship.
So, and this is one thing that I thought was the coolest part. I'm looking at, how many notes I take for this. For directors, I just have Dennis Felton's name. I didn't write anything under it. A-listers, Sundiata Gaines, and it's spelled incorrectly. I didn't write anything under it. And then a bunch of notes about those other players I brought up earlier. The prominent extras, I thought this was probably one of the most fascinating, ongoing, lists of people. And I feel like, not in a rude way, I feel like you missed the boat on here.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Because there's some incredible names from the season.
I took two off it, by the way. I took Jody Meeks and I took Patrick Patterson off.
Yeah, but Meeks only played 11 games that year, but he's
which is why
I get that. And Patrick Patterson, he was like a top 10 player coming out of high school, but he
was a true freshman.
I think this was his freshman year. So, but from a coaching standpoint, I remember this almost being what I consider the golden age of SEC basketball, because it was almost like how SEC football was in the early to mid 90s, where you had these kind of long-standing coaches, where you have Bruce Pearl, who is an SEC coach. He was at Tennessee, obviously, and I think it's his 6th year there. But he's a guy that's been in the SEC for over 10 years. Mark Gottfried had been at Bama for over 10 years. Rick Stansbury from Mississippi State, 14 years. Kevin Stallings at Vandy was the coach, 17 years there. So you had all these really long-standing. Billy Donovan, John Pelfrey. I can't believe you didn't mention him, from Arkansas.
Yeah, I didn't think that.
He's like the John Chavis of SEC basketball.
Rick Stansbury is one that I have Rick Stansbury stuff later on that we're going to get to.
Yeah. And then Andy Kennedy, of course, at Ole Miss. So you had some really, I don't know if they were great coaches, but they were coaches that had made some tournament runs and also had a longevity that you don't really see as much anymore. From a player standpoint, you left off my man Vernado.
Oh, yeah. All right, fine. Yeah.
The all-time NCAA leader in block shots. He averaged 4.6 blocks a game.
What was his wingspan?
Think about that. 80,000? I don't know. This is a jet.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. I'm pretty sure that's a record. Like I said, the Mike Mercer thing, even though he was kicked off the team, I forgot about the Tennessee team with Chris Lofton, who has the most three-pointers made in SEC history. Chandler Parsons from Florida. Wayne Chisholm. I don't know if you remember him.
I know Wayne Chisholm with the headband. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my buddy, one of my best friends who didn't like sports that much at all, but he would do the NCAA tournament every year. And this year, I remember specifically in 2008, my buddy, Stefan Viscachill, shout out, I know he's listening. He, for every day, probably once the brackets came out until this team lost, said Tennessee's winning a national championship. Tennessee's winning a national championship. Chris Lofton, Wayne Chisholm. All of these guys were going to make up this team and this special run, kind of in a way like what Florida did. There was expectations that Tennessee could have a run like that. So yes, you talk about how the SEC was kind of up for grabs a little bit, and nobody really took it. But Tennessee was in that class, probably above everybody else, even after the tournament.
So they went 14-2 in the regular season in conference play. They were head and shoulders above every other team in the conference. They were ranked number 1 at one point that season. Yeah. They were in the top 5 for most of the year, because that was one thing that's interesting, to see it play out from January to February on, where you didn't have a lot of SEC teams in there. So yeah, Tennessee was really good. Here's the one that surprised me the most, and I had totally forgotten about this. He actually finished 12th in rebounds as a guard, averaging 6.6 a game. Patrick Beverly was at Arkansas.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Great reference.
But it was cool to see some of those, like I said, with Georgia, and obviously a lot of the talent they had, and then some of them had left, but and Bama was awful. But you had at this time, I think they had on this roster, you had 4 top 100 players, and 5 of their top 10 all-time recruits, whatever you have on 24/7, was on this roster. So there were a lot of teams. It seemed like there was a lot of talent for. I don't know how everyone was so mediocre. Besides Tennessee,
I don't think there was a first-round pick a year after this tournament from the SEC.
I didn't look at that, dang it.
Which is bizarre to think about. I mean, not the entire first
was.
round. No, I don't think there was.
There were only 2 in this one,
yeah,
and they weren't until 14 and 16.
And I think the year after, and part of that because of Kentucky having this horrible year, there was not a first-round pick from the SEC. You can double-check me on that, but I think I'm right.
I'm doing it right now, and so it'd be 2009?
So it'd be the 2009 draft, yes. I believe there was...
How many square feet?
There was 685 square feet.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Mizzou was...
Not in the SEC.
That don't count.
Yeah, doesn't count.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy to think about, though. I mean, different times in SEC basketball. Okay, let's get to a little bit of the story arc, which we've kind of already gotten into a little bit. But your favorite line from the doc, did you have anything, or you want me to start off here?
I got like 7.
Fire away.
So, and I meant to bring this up earlier because you said the thing about, what's his name, Billy Gillespie. Like Kentucky, when all this was happening... I know a lot of people think that Kentucky... Like, if you're a Kentucky basketball fan and a Bama football fan, you're the worst person. You're just the worst. I'm sorry. I love you and thanks for listening, but that's tough. I forgot how... I don't want to say, like, entitled Kentucky fans can be, but there was a quote from... And I forgot the guy who said it, but he was somebody working with the SEC during the tournament. And he said, and for a program of that stature to take one for the rest of the remaining institutions so that we may... even continue this tournament, that was really quite remarkable. Like the fact that Kentucky even allowed them, like, you know what, we'll continue play. We'll play 2 games tomorrow. Like I thought that was so weird that he was praising Kentucky for just doing what they're supposed to do.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know that they lost this quarterfinal game, and that looked really bad. Kentucky looked like it was on the bubble, though. I think Kentucky ended up being a really low seed, so they probably needed the tournament as well. It wasn't just like, oh, Kentucky's sitting there with like a 1 or a 2 seed. They're just going to play because, no big deal. They're going to help out everybody. But I think they were a really borderline team to make the NCAA tournament, and they still somehow got in. It probably maybe even helped them that Georgia went on to win the SEC championship and made it look like they just kind of ran into a team of destiny, so to speak. A buzzsaw.
Yeah, I mean, they like... It was odd because they I think they were going to make the tournament anyway. They played pretty well. I think they finished second overall in the conference at the end of the
they were
the regular season.
Yeah.
I mean, like they had lost like 5 games in a row in the first month of the season, which was I think they would have made it based on name alone. But yeah, you're right. It was very odd.
My favorite line, I'll interrupt and then you can fire off the rest of yours. Came from Joe Dean Jr., who was paired with Tim Brando on the broadcast during the games that they had on Friday night. He said after the fact on the doc, he said, my first thought was that we were being attacked by terrorists. It was in 2008, so like kind of within that window.
I saw you put that in the doc, and it was very interesting.
The sound that tornado made, I imagine for the people who were there in the Georgia Dome that day, they was described as like a train going across the Georgia Dome roof. I imagine some of the sounds that you heard from that were unlike anything before, and I give Joe Dean a little bit of credit for saying what was on his mind. I don't know if that's where my mind would have went, but hey, his did.
Yeah, I've heard train a lot.
Not terrorists.
I've never heard terrorists, but that T came out of his mouth. I was like, I did not know where that's going. Yep. Okay. So I had a couple that I thought were pretty cool, and. So there was Bill Rafferty said in the finals, because by the way, Bill Rafferty and Vern Lundquist,
onions.
Those two on a call, that's incredible. That's just absolutely incredible. But he said they're going to change their schedule next year. They're only playing doubleheaders. I thought that was pretty funny.
Great line.
The former commissioner Mike Slive, he had a pretty good quote. And he said that's why we play, which I thought was pretty cool because it's like especially with college basketball and how that goes. I forgot who said this. We said there's no way you can ask a team to play Saturday morning and then play again Saturday night.
Mm-hmm. That's a good cold take for the broadcast.
Yeah. So, and then my favorite line of the whole thing, and I admittedly teared up when I saw this, and I know this is going to come to a shock, as a shock to a lot of Georgia fans, but this is just something that, like, and again, I was along for this run because I was, again, living in Georgia with one of my roommates and closest friends is a huge Georgia fan. It was so much fun to get caught up in this run they had this weekend. And there was they at one point of the doc they talked about there's like 2 people that had passed away from this actual tornado, and one of the guys' his name was Mike Turner. He was the tornado survivor, and he had lost his wife of 47 years, which was just gut-wrenching. And he was going over his injuries, and it sounded like the side effects of like some kind of prescription medicine you would take. It was like, I had a split pelvis, I tore every ligament in my knees, I had like broke both my legs, broke my spine, like, yeah, all this crazy stuff. And he said this, and I quote, I had to not give up. You don't give up. The Dogs didn't give up. And if the Bulldogs, if they can do it, certainly I can do it. And I just thought that was such a cool thing because, a lot of times we talk about how like it might mean too much or people, take stuff, especially in the SEC, too seriously. And I just thought this was something that is really relatable. And people outside of this region may think it's stupid, but it really, I hate to say this, but it really does mean like a lot more to people down here. And for this guy to say that in the midst of such tragedy, I just thought it was interesting, like the unique relationship fans have with these institutions, and it was really cool. And then he also said, the most precious things you have are memories. And then I broke down crying.
Yeah, that part was like, tough. All right, you just want me to cry at this point. That's what you're going for. How about even the bus driver? The bus driver had a heart attack. The Georgia bus driver had no idea about any of that. And then apparently we find out they're like, oh yeah, we should win it for our bus driver too. I don't know if they were playing for him, but weird.
It didn't even say what team.
I think they said Georgia, that he was for Georgia.
So in the little bottom part, which is like introducing his name and who he was, it just said bus driver.
I was like, why is he on here?
Who? Like, what is? Yeah. So, but when I was watching that, I hate to say this, but I started laughing because in the midst of all this chaos, they just throw in this little blurb like, oh yeah, this guy had a heart attack. Tony over here, he had just coughing up a lung and had like 12 Polish sausages, and so he was like, he brought it up, and all I could think of was the scene from Stress Relief in The Office where all this stuff's happening during the CPR scene. And then all of a sudden, like, this bus driver was basically Dwight turning. He's like, hello, Clarice. I was like, what? Like, it gets even weirder.
To their credit, for this doc, I thought that they did such a great job of interviewing so many people. I mean, to track that guy down, the bus driver who had a heart attack 12 years. I mean, this doc was made, more recently than 2020. But I still thought that was really impressive, and it spoke to the amount of people that they were able to contact to do this, and it made the overall product better, I thought.
I thought it was kind of... childish on his part to kind of one-up the team that weekend.
Right.
Like they should have had the cardiac kids. They couldn't even say it that weekend.
Yeah, it's not about you, man. The thing that you didn't know / remember until rewatching or researching this, we hit on this earlier, so I won't spend too much time on this. The Georgia having 9 scholarship players or 8 or whatever it was on the roster, the fact that Felton had kicked a couple of players off the team right before the start of the season. I mean, he said that they were pretty much built like a team that was not in any position to go on a run like this in 3 days, that they only went 7 to 8 deep, and that was with a walk-on. And the fact that the 7 guys who actually played needed IVs in between those 2 games, which there was like a 6-hour break, probably even less than that, in between the quarterfinal and semifinal game between Kentucky and then the one that they had to play later against Mississippi State.
Well, and also, like, I would have been pissed. We talked about this a couple weeks ago at the Combine. They were supposed to tip off. I don't know how the SEC tournament always does this, but it's like, all right, yeah, we got 2 games in the afternoon, 2 at night. We're going to take a break. And every time they do that, I'm like, you know what? Why don't we not take a break? Why don't we just start the games? Because damn well when they have the 7 o'clock game, it's going to somehow end at like 9:45. So they're just waiting until like 11:30 before they called it, which is outrageous. First off,
well, they have to do that from a logistics standpoint so that they sell the tickets in sessions as opposed to selling for all 4 games to clear the fans out. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's very inconvenient.
Right. So then, of course, like the 7 o'clock game goes to overtime. You're sitting around waiting, and they were like, they had even said like, we heard they were gonna just have the tip off for the first game at like 2 or 3 to kind of give us some more time to rest. And then the SEC was like, nope, 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's like, because like in the doc, it even says like, they talked about kind of pushing the start time back, and then like it just cut and it says 12:05 tip. And I was like, okay, I guess we didn't do that.
Yep.
But yeah, so I forgot. I just forgot like how crazy that whole Friday night into Saturday day was, and I mean just a lot. Like like I said, the on-air thing for 64 minutes. I forgot about that. I definitely thought Albert Jackson, number 34, he's the one that had like the big dunk. I think against Arkansas.
Oh yeah.
I thought he was gonna be the best player in the history of the world. He was like 6'11", 270. I was like, this guy is the best athlete on the face of the earth. He was not. He averaged like 3.7 points per game.
So Marler's mid to late 2000s takes, one of which that he was going to be the best player in the world. That
Yeah.
Nelly, Tim McGraw, over again. Do it over again. What's the name of that song? You know what it is.
Over and over again.
Over and over again was going to be the best song of all time, and that Ryan Cabrera, a lyric of his, was going to be worth a tattoo.
Dude, I spent my 21st birthday at an OAR concert that I drove across state lines for. I don't know what I was doing back then. But no, it was, I forgot how much fun that team was to watch, and it was cool because, I think I've told you this before. This is going in 2008. I ended up taking a semester off because of just like some stuff that had happened where like I was going to like delay graduation and like all this other crap. So I almost moved to Athens that summer.
Ooh, that would have been dangerous.
And so that's why I didn't do it. I was like, I need to go home to Patty Sue because otherwise this is gonna be a problem. The last thing outside of, and I've saved this for the end, and I'm gonna make you listen to it anyway because the tournament itself, which we'll save like for the very end, I forgot how incredible that tournament was. But for this team specifically, I forgot that after all of that, they got on a 22-7 run to start the finals against Arkansas.
Yep, they came out ready to roll, and you would think that this team is going to come out gas, and eventually they're going to wear down. And they would have moments like that during the game, but they should have worn down much earlier. I even forgot that they had the two previous games before the second game on Saturday had both gone into overtime. The Ole Miss game and the Kentucky game both went into overtime. There's this great shot of Mississippi State coach Rick Stansbury, because he's sitting there watching both. He's watching this quarterfinal game, this atypical quarterfinal game at Georgia Tech, and he just smiles when it goes into overtime. And he's like, "This is great! I can't believe we get to just play some team that's really gassed and is in these weird circumstances playing the second game of
You
the
had
day."
a tornado go through a building in downtown Atlanta while the team you were playing was at the free throw line in overtime.
Yeah.
And then the next day, this game goes to overtime. Yeah, that's
Stansbury admitted
doing something right.
He admitted all their prep too went into Kentucky, and that they probably weren't as prepared as they could have been to face Georgia. I mean, there was a team that should have won that game, and they're like, well, I guess we'll have to figure it out on the fly, and it did not work out so well for Mississippi State. Okay, great hypothetical for this specific story. What would have happened afterwards if the result was flipped? Now, I think there's two ways to kind of tackle this question because it's different than what we usually do on It Just Meant More if we're saying the final score is flipped with the team, something like that. So what if Alabama's 3 never went in against Mississippi State on Friday night? That's pretty much what the doc was based on. This 3 that Mikael Riley hits.
Oh, really? That's the whole doc was based on that?
Well, the title was based on that. It kind of sets the stage for it. I thought you would be on board with that because it was Bama hitting a 3. So Mississippi State could have and should have fouled. They were up 3, and Rick Stansbury lost his mind when they couldn't foul. They could have called the foul on this reach-in. They fouled on this reach-in at half court.
Guys,
it should have been
if you haven't seen the doc, spoiler alert, SEC refs still sucked in 2008.
It was
like
bad.
This was even further when that last shot Mikael Riley got off. There was 0.5 seconds left, and he came off a screen, caught the ball, set his feet at 3, and then put up the shot. There's no way that he got that shot off with that amount of time.
I thought he had 2 seconds left. I thought he had 2.5 seconds left.
He had 0.5.
Okay. I think that, though, there are so many different instances, that being one of them, where this could have turned out so much differently. And we talk about the ramifications of, okay, this is a shot that just, it looked like it was rimming out. It hit both sides of the rim and then bounced off the backboard and came back down, which that never happens like that, ever. It always rims in, rims out.
It doesn't, Connor.
Well, you're saying this like it's a bad thing, but the shot going in forced overtime, and like we said, hopefully saved thousands of lives. Had this shot not gone in, then who knows what kind of disaster we would have been talking about.
I hear what you're saying. You're putting me in a tough spot to choose between advancing to the semifinals of the SEC tournament and thousands of lives.
It might mean too much, Marler.
I'm lying about that, yeah.
But, I mean, the what-ifs of that, Mikael Riley turns out to be this hero, and obviously he didn't know it at the time. He was just a kid who made a very timely jump shot, but the lives that could have been saved
that team was.
Yeah, I mean, I think, though, that there are so many different what-ifs with that. Another what-if. We talked about this a little bit earlier. What if they had just made the decision to cancel the tournament? They're like, you know what? We've got scaffolding falling. We've got cranes moving back and forth at the Georgia Dome. We need to cancel this tournament, and we'll just crown the regular season champ as our automatic qualifier. There were discussions to do that. I mean, that seemed, at the time, that seemed easier than the logistical nightmare that they had to face, where they had these full-time employees pulling all-nighters. And if you don't understand what goes into putting on an event like this, go watch this doc and watch what that crew had to do just to get everything up and running at Georgia Tech, where they had spring break going on. Yes, there was nothing there, but they didn't even have concession stands or security guards or any. They didn't have the infrastructure to all of a sudden be like, let's have an event.
I'm pretty sure they never even got clearance to do it. I think they were just like kind of like
right?
snuck in. Yeah, and just like it's like somebody get some bolt cutters.
So
we're gonna go in here.
They could have easily just been like, you know what, this is ridiculous. Let's not deal with any of this. But apparently, we find out after that Felton was one of the coaches, obviously, who was pushing them to want to do this. And what could have happened would have just been, we wouldn't be talking about this story, obviously, to this day. You, my friend, went down a rabbit hole though. So
it's amazing.
They didn't want to go to Georgia Tech. That wasn't the first choice. Phillips Arena was the first choice. But Marler, why couldn't they have the SEC tournament continue at Phillips Arena?
So, admittedly, like I said, this was the most enjoyable rabbit holes I went down. This rabbit hole was so useless, and I couldn't have been more consumed by it. Like, we were like 10, 15 minutes into the actual doc, watching the doc, and then they were like, yeah, we had to move it somewhere. We couldn't move it to Phillips Arena because there was an event there. And I was like, hold on, wait, what? Like, what do you mean event? Like, what was the event? And for whatever reason, this like consumed me because I just growing up in this state, being from Atlanta, I knew it had to be something stupid. It just had to be something stupid because, to be honest, they probably should have been playing at Phillips Arena the whole time. Like, I was surprised by the amount of numbers that they said they had and like the tickets they sold that weekend for the tournament.
They said that they had, yeah.
So let's keep in mind that Phillips Arena, I think, sat like 16 to 19,000. And I don't know if I believe that anyway, because this season was a down year for the whole conference. Nobody was any good. You think, like, Vanderbilt was the second best team in the conference. You think they were traveling?
Kentucky fans always travel, though. I mean, they always do.
Agree, but not 20,000.
Not 20,000.
For an 18-win team. Right. So, I mean, they did kind of catch fire late in the season. Anyway, I was so consumed by this, and part of the reason why is, so I Googled and I was like, what concert was in Phillips Arena March 15th, 2008? And the first thing that popped up was Avril Lavigne's World Tour from 2008. And I was like, no way. Gosh. And I click on it, and it was not. And that just triggered me. I was like, I have to find it. I was like looking up like old AJC and Atlanta Magazine archives. Never found it.
That's
no idea.
Tragic. If anybody knows what was at Phillips Arena that following night where they could not move the SEC tournament there, please tell us. Please tell me it was. Maybe it was a P.D. Pablo concert. I don't know. I have no idea.
If you don't know, please just make something up and send it to me because it is. I hate this. I hate this whole thing.
Wrong answers.
I'm like, how can I not work Google correctly? So anyway, yeah, I think that was But other than like, and I know I said the whole thing about the rabbit holes. And every time we do this one, like this is like where you have like the biggest conspiracy theories. Like, what could have happened if they? I wrote down nothing. I don't think anything would have changed. I think when you brought up the thing about canceling the tournament, I think they were trying to lean towards that because, like you said, Kentucky, I don't know if they were a bubble team, but they were not. Like, we were not getting a lot of teams in the tournament, like, guaranteed. And it was they ended up getting 6 in because Georgia won. But, the fact that Kentucky was an 11 seed, I think maybe they would have, I think that's probably why they wanted to try to cancel it possibly. But I wrote down, honestly, not much would have changed because Sonny Gaines was never drafted. This didn't like boost his draft stock.
Had a cup of coffee in the NBA free agent, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, he made it to the league, but I'm saying he was like it didn't like boost his draft stock, and really no player boost their draft stock. UGA still lost in the first round of the tournament. Felton was still fired less than a year later after this run, which I think is the biggest surprise. And then you look at the teams that actually made the tournament. It didn't change anything crazy, good or worse, or better or worse for any specific team because you have 6 teams make the tournament. Only one makes it to the second weekend, and that's Tennessee, who was the 2 seed in their region.
You're right. Maybe we're looking a little bit too micro with this, and we should go macro. And I would have to go back and really look this up and try and find out when the ball for this got rolling. But could this have expedited the need for a new stadium in Atlanta and expedited the process for Mercedes-Benz, which was better suited to handle something like that than the Georgia Dome was? I mean, looking at
there's already a hole in it.
The basic structure of the roof was built better to handle this. Could something like that have made them? I mean, they were talking to all these engineers and stuff in the dock, and they're just like, yeah, we really weren't prepared for anything like this. I'm not sure if that went into the planning process that went into Mercedes-Benz or something like that. But if something like that can make you take a step back and go, whoa, let's maybe reevaluate how we're doing things and put more measures in place in case something like that does happen.
Right.
Because you got to remember. And I don't need to remind you this. I'm saying this to the listener.
Well, then don't, Connor.
But Atlanta is such a big hub for these big national events. And they host Super Bowls. They host Final Fours. They host the Olympics, for crying out loud. And if you're going to be bidding on things like this, if other cities are going to point at you and be like, hey, look what this just happened at this place over here. Yeah. And it was dumb. I'm not saying that this is directly what led to Mercedes-Benz. But if that played any sort of process in what came to be Mercedes-Benz, I wouldn't be stunned.
Are you done talking shit about my city or what?
I said good things. I said they have great events, man.
No, I definitely get that idea. I would say no, because at the time, and this is something we should have touched on earlier, to be honest, the Dome was only 16 years old. Like, it was still a very, very new stadium. They had hosted 2 Super Bowls.
Wow, that's right.
They ended up getting the Final Four in 2013. What ended up the Mercedes-Benz thing, one of the things they were trying to, what went into that was they wanted to get a soccer team. They wanted to be able to host a Super Bowl and like national championships and all that kind of stuff. They also are trying to get the World Cup. That was something that was like went into that. But it was interesting because, one of the things I looked up was this something that we had already seen before? Like, remember when the thing happened in Minnesota, before like the Vikings game, like in the old
with the snow that collapsed on it, yeah.
Yeah, so that was like 2 years after this. So we really hadn't seen anything too close or too similar to this, like except for maybe that World Series game in '89, like you brought up. So, or '88, whichever one it was.
'89.
So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you're right, '89. So I don't know if that would have really changed things. And again, like the SEC was so underwhelming even in the tournament. Like one team made it past the second round, 3 teams made it past the first round, and in the losses where they like each team got beat, in those losses that bounced them out of the tournament, they lost by an average of 16 points each team. So I don't know if much would have changed.
One last question, and it's a dumb question on that subject. Doing the time frame in my head, and like I said, I didn't grow up in this area, so I didn't know stuff like this. Georgia Dome built after they got the Olympic bid, before they got the Olympic bid, as part of the Olympic bid?
It was before, but honestly, I don't think they did. I'm sure they did something, but I don't remember anything being in the Dome. I mean, handball and all that kind of stuff was in the Congress Center.
Right.
Basketball was in the Omni. Actually, no, you're right. The basketball was in the Dome, I think.
Okay, that would make sense.
So,
that would make sense.
But
all right, last thing here: the play or image that we're always going to remember when thinking of this. I don't think a play is necessarily what this would really call for. The image that I'll always remember is the Georgia Dome rafters just swaying, and the sight of watching it look like this could probably come down at any given moment, or you could all of a sudden just have massive holes in the roof, and who knows what would happen after something like that. But just thinking, that is about the last place on planet Earth that I would want to be standing right now.
Yeah, the image that like you definitely remember, like the lasting image is that weird zoom in. It was like this very eerie zoom in from the camera, like going in, like we see like, oh my God, there's a hole in the thing. Because like last night when I was watching it, like I think it was the Kentucky AD was like, they had a bolt like fall a foot from me and my son. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, it's a bolt. It's not that big.
From that high, though.
And then like, and it was also like a massive bolt. Yeah. It was not like a small little thing. And I remember saying that, and then like 5 seconds later, I got up to go to the bathroom, and I stubbed my toe, and I went down like just a soccer player in like the World Cup, and just was whining. I was like, I'm never gonna walk again. So yeah, that was pretty tough. Yeah, so that's definitely the lasting image. Now, listen, I know you don't want to do this because I've already dragged this episode on for too long, but we're gonna nerd out for a second.
Okay.
This is gonna be a new segment.
Ooh, I like where you're going with this. I know where you're going with this, but I like it.
This deep dive that I did, I just thought there were so many cool things that were happening at the time. Real quick, one thing that I didn't remember or didn't know, I guess, until rewatching this, I also forgot that Georgia went to the first round and played Xavier, who was a team that was like a 3 seed. Georgia was a 14 seed. They were up 35-26 at the half.
And lost by, what, 12, I think?
Yeah, lost by 12. So I forgot about that because I thought, maybe this is going to be a whole thing. So the two things I want to nerd out about real quick is the 2008 college basketball, like the draft class and the tournament itself. And that's what I forgot about most, is how incredible this tournament was as a whole. And then before that, I want to talk about this baseball thing, because I thought this was like weird for me, because I was going through, and I do remember this being like, I'm probably romanticizing it a little bit, but I do remember like that 2005 class where they had just won the SEC championship in football, and they were really, really good. I mean, they had won it 2002. They were a top 5 team in 2003, yep. And so they're a really good football team. And you have that baseball signing class, and you have that football signing class, the basketball signing class as well. And I'm going through, because I remember that, like, I played with, like, Brandon Phillips. His little brother was one of he was a shortstop that signed with Georgia, and he got drafted in the second round, ended up not going. I played with him in summer ball, and then, like, a kid I played with in high school, Nate Moreau, he was a lefty pitcher that was, like, he was a lefty throwing, like, 92, so he was going to be drafted. He ended up going to UGA, but they had so much talent in that class. So I'm looking through the Major League Baseball draft to see, like, who all ended up not going to Georgia and where they were drafted. And there's a kid named Kieran Pope who beat us in semifinals my senior year. It was not great.
Not better.
I think he ended up getting drafted like the third round or something like that, and just all these like great talent. So I'm going through, and you have all these guys that not in a rude way, but they didn't really pan out in like the major leagues. Like the catcher Jonathan Egan, a couple other guys. Beckham obviously did pan out, but he went to Georgia. I'm going through it, and so I just go to MLB.com, and I'm looking at that draft class, and you should check it out, because if you're like a baseball fan, that first round was loaded with people that are still in it. I'm looking through it, like all the players from the state of Georgia that were drafted, and you see all these players that were committed to Georgia, ended up going pro, whatever. I go to the very last one that was drafted from the state. It was a man named Gerald Posey from Lee County, Georgia, who was drafted in the 50th round, which is the last round, at number 1496. And I'm pretty sure there's like only 1,500 total players drafted. And he was listed as a pitcher, and I played against him as well in college. He was the smoothest shortstop, hitter, all of it I've ever seen in my entire life. Best hands. It was Buster Posey.
Oh, I've heard of him.
Buster Posey was drafted behind all of these guys.
Decided to go
the fifth to last.
Decided to go to college instead. Yeah, probably a good decision for him. But Jason Hayward was drafted that year too, wasn't he?
So Jason Hayward was I didn't see him. I think he was 2006. He was 2006, because he actually played in high school with a buddy of mine, Kyle Price, and he was out of McDonough. So he was drafted 2006. His debut was like 2008, I want to say.
No, his debut was later than that. That much I know, because I remember watching that as a sophomore in college, and he hit a home run against the Cubs in the season opening game. Jason Hayward was drafted.
It's the first pitch, wasn't it?
Something like that. 2007 MLB draft. So
okay.
In between, split the difference there.
So yeah, I did not like him a lot, because he replaced Jeff as like the new fan favorite.
Jeff
Francoeur, So, but like there was just, I always forget how much talent there is, like from Gwinnett County, like from like a baseball standpoint, or the state of Georgia in general. There's so much talent, and some of those guys and like names and stuff like that. But when you get to the actual basketball, like the March Madness or NCAA tournament, whatever you want to call it, I wish that, like more than anything, we could relive that specific tournament. And I hate the way it turned out for teams like Georgia, and the SEC was terrible in it. But it was so weird, because you look at like the players in the draft: Derrick Rose, Michael Beasley, who I was convinced was going to be a stud.
Everybody was.
Just like one of the best. Yeah, number 2 overall. Then you have like guys like O.J. Mayo, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Love. I forgot Russell Westbrook and Kevin Love were on the same team, and Darren Collison was on that team. Yeah. It's pretty good. Yeah, Eric Gordon, drafted 7th overall. The Lopez brothers, Roy Hibbert, JaVale McGee, Serge Ibaka, those are all first rounders. And then you have Deontay Jordan was at A&M.
DeAndre Jordan, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a second round guy. And then you look at the actual like tournament itself, because I was reading like, kind of recaps of it. I totally forgot this is the year that Steph Curry went off.
He was unconscious. I mean, just
it was incredible.
Unbelievable. Like that in itself, like watching Davidson alone was, I mean, that was fun. I mean, that was the type of thing that no matter who you are as a sports fan, you tune in for Steph Curry. And he captivated the first few weekends. But what also made that tournament so good was that we had one of the best championship games ever between Kansas and Memphis. Yeah. This great game between Derrick Rose and what turns out to be, Mario Chalmers hitting that shot to force overtime after, Memphis couldn't make a free throw down the stretch. Does that lead?
Derrick Rose couldn't.
Yeah, Derrick Rose couldn't. Does that lead to Calipari eventually going to Kentucky? Yeah, probably maybe played a part in that. But The tournament was incredible. It was really, really
Yeah.
good. I remember that for sure.
So you have Steph Curry averaging 32 points per game in 4 games. He had 40 in the first round. Like there was like some run against Georgetown, who was a very good team. Like they had Roy Hibbert and I think Patrick Ewing Jr. He outscored their entire team to close out the second half of that game. He outscored him 25-22 in the final 12 minutes. Like it was so much fun. Like he took over, and you had other guys like Blake Griffin, Tyler Hansbrough, just a lot. Like and it was also the first time in tournament history where all 4 number 1 seeds made it to the Final Four.
Oh, that's right. It was very chalky, as I like to say.
There you go. And Memphis was like that team. Memphis was 38-0 going into the national championship game before they missed that free throw. They were 38-0.
Wait, were they really?
And then lost. Yeah.
All right, now we gotta look this up too. We're looking up stuff like Jason Hayward's draft stock, because I usually pay attention to this because obviously Indiana's got the last remaining undefeated streak. Yeah. Okay. Holy cow, that's unreal.
Oh, hold on, I'm wrong
losses.
here.
They had 2 losses. 2 losses.
They were 33-1 going into.
They had the loss
year before,
to
year after.
who did they lose to? An SEC team.
Tennessee.
Yep. I was going to say that earlier. I almost brought that up, but I was like, wait, am I off a year? No, that was a very, very historic game, and Tennessee fans probably remember that. So that was what happened in 2008.
Yeah.
Great year I graduated high school and started college. Fun year.
Damn it! I wish I would have sent you the first round from the MLB draft that year, because it was
Loaded.
Justin Upton and all those guys too. And this is also the year. Fun fact for Georgia fans. I know that this will feel good for a lot of you to hear. This was the year that I found out my high school girlfriend made out with Noshan Moreno.
Oh yeah, sick brag.
Which is honestly that's a glow up. Good for you.
You just tip your cap at that point. You just say, you know what? If that guy can cry like that on national TV, he's earned it. He has earned it. This was fun. This was good. Hopefully everybody enjoyed us doing a different take on It Just Meant More. We've got a few more of these that we're going to be cranking out. I mean, this is going to be a weekly staple now that we are in #NoSportsZone. This is something that we're going to be doing a lot of. I hope everybody enjoys these. Give us some feedback, games that you want us to do. We've got a few that we definitely want to do in the near future. We might get into some more basketball. We might not. But we're definitely going to be doing football ones in the very, very near future. Wanted to do something like basketball related just because of, obviously, everybody's going to be thinking about how much they miss basketball right now. So go watch Miracle 3. It's awesome. It's great. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole of watching a lot of these SEC story docs. They're very good. They're very, very good.
Yeah.
And by the way,
we should rank those.
We should. I'm going to be writing about a sports doc once a week on SDS called Doc Discussion. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. I'm writing about this one. If you want to read more about it, some stuff that we didn't necessarily talk about here, but that I have that'll be on SDS on Sunday. We have a ton of content on SDS, by the way. I know there are people saying, "Hey, what in the world are people going to do? They're just going to end up talking about nothing." No. We even have our co-founder, Kevin Duffy, cranking out stuff, writing about what everybody's watching, what's going on in the world, and we're going to have everybody covered from a content standpoint. Like, that is not lacking at SDS. Adam Spencer's coming up with weird rankings on a daily basis. Michael Bratton is still cranking out all the news stories, and I'm pretty sure he's going to do quarterback film studies in the near future, probably too, because he crushes those. But yes, we have a lot of stuff on SDS.
A whole lot.
Yeah, we've even got 64 best moments of March Madness. Shout out to our editor, Chris Wright, who put that together. 64. 64. There's a lot. I think I contributed like 15 to that or something. I don't know. It was a lot.
Oh yeah, I forgot to do that. Good.
Attaboy.
I didn't get tasked with it. I volunteered because you're doing the one doc a week. So I'm going to be doing sports movie reviews.
Ooh.
Just minute-long movie reviews. And so I was going to start with Over the Top, and then one of my comedian friends had literally put out he does like these as well, and he put one out of Over the Top on Monday. So I have to wait on that one.
For the TikTok?
But probably going to be...
The kid's doing it on the TikTok?
It's not TikTok.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, put that on your TikTok.
We're going to be coming back, though. You're going to be... If you're listening to this on Thursday, you're going to get a chance to listen to us again on Friday, because on Friday, it's Casual Friday. And guess what we are doing? We are
Not wearing pants.
We're wearing pants, and we're going to power rank some Office characters. We're going to get really heated on this. We're going to each come up with our own rankings. We're not going to try and come up with a consensus ranking because we realize every single time we do that, we nearly break up as a podcast, and that's not good. Yeah. We don't want any of that.
Well, and we're still going to do Fourth and Wrong, too, so it'll be fun.
We're going to do Fourth and Wrong at the end of it. Jay Woody's got the questions up. It's going to be great. Join us for Casual Friday as well. Download, subscribe, rate, review, all of those fun things. Marler, we don't need to remember... It might mean too much. We need to remember.
Go Dogs.
I was going to say just one. That's fine too. That's
also good.
Talk to you guys soon.